Hello, I want to welcome everyone to the Mindful Leaders Compass, where we're going to talk about navigating communication mastery for professional excellence and personal harmony. Don't be afraid to be responsive as we go forward. If something resonates with you, throw it in the chat. As we're talking about navigating communication mastery for professional excellence and personal harmony, it is definitely about navigation. The people around you, the circumstances that you will find yourselves in are always growing and changing. And I'm here to give you three things. And I know there's more on the agenda, but it's all about three things. One is encouragement. The second is insight. And then the last one is a path to more information. That's it. All you have to do is receive it. And when it resonates with you, and it will, use it. Okay? And without being overly dramatic, the information covered today could change your life and those around you for the better. But first, I want to make sure that my people are in the room. Who are my people? Well, they are leaders who serve, not bosses, there's a difference, but they're leaders who serve people and want to serve them better. They're also in situations where emotion plays a factor. They're working with individuals with low or developing emotional intelligence or situational intelligence. They also want to grow their capacity for handling people-centric work. And you're ready to boost your mindfulness with thought processing tools. And you're also seeking that next level of internal and external communication skills. Now, if that's you, you are in the right place. You are my people. The soil is fertile, the sun is bright, and you are about to grow. So in order to do that, I need you to be planted. I need you to be here, 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 here. And so everything I say has a purpose. So let me add some context. The first here is understand you're here for a purpose. You don't have time to waste. And what I'm going to share is not something that should ever be wasted. Remember the purpose. The purpose will drive you to pay attention when you get distracted. It happens. The next thing is, I want you to be here in the moment. And I want you to hear in the moment. So closed mouths don't get fed. Closed minds don't get food for thought. And this is going to be a feast. And it's going to be a lot of information. I'm going to fill your brain's belly. The next thing is I want you to hear how you respond, whether it's mental or physical. Your feelings are valid. And you are going to feel some things as I share. Feelings are to be observed and explored, not feared or ignored. And then lastly, be here in this moment. And what I mean by that is if you've ever fed a baby, okay, they open their mouths, but they move all over the place while you're trying to get the spoon in there. All right. Because, hey, it's easy to be distracted and adults are the same way. So stay here. And if you are watching this as a recording later, pause it if you get distracted. Your growth deserves your full attention. And as a leader, your growth is about more than just you. We all agree on this, right? Okay, good. So here's a little bit of information about me. I am the communication navigator. I'm the father of four, husband of one. I am a workshop facilitator, an executive, life, communication, and trauma-informed coach. I am also an online content creator, a keynote speaker, author, and I am a community servant. And I have certifications in blended learning, instructional design, trauma-informed professional life coaching, and trauma-informed coaching. So let's get to it. We are here to escape the defaults of normal human conditioning. Life trains us to be reactionary because you never know what might happen. And if you are left in a moment or moments too long without resources to deal with that, you become traumatized. The moments or situations are just a tip of the iceberg. But if we crash into them, you will sink. And when you sink in those situations, in those moments, although it was just the tip of the iceberg, it stops you from moving forward because sunk boats don't move. The moments and situations are going to come in your life. And that is what it means to be alive. Life is always life. And that's what it means to lead. You have to be on the front lines. So whether it's your personal or professional life, things are going to happen. But I don't want you to fall into the trap and be affected by the dysfunction, the disconnection, or the disdain. Dysfunction happens when things are not working the way that they should. And it's hard for things to work as they should if you are not connected. And then over time, it creates a sense of disdain. And we want to oppose those. We want the opposite effect, right? We want to create powerful performance. We want to connect, and we also want to have control, not over other people, over ourselves. And then we want to have admirable attributes. We don't want to have things that repel. We want to draw people toward situations, toward projects, toward initiatives, toward goals. And the best way to do that is through communication, understanding internally and externally the value of that. So, this is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to discuss ways to reduce communication drama by acknowledging trauma. We're going to talk about unlocking potential with the key aspects of communication. We're also going to discuss on how to remove emotional condemnation. It's a very real thing. We've all dealt with it. We're not going to continue to deal with it. And then we're also going to tap into the power of opposing emotions and then navigating your emotional compasses. That's what we're going to do. It's a whole lot. So strap in, okay? But first, I want to tell you a story. Years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started taking a trip to Ely, Minnesota with some friends into the deep woods. And I mean deep woods, okay? And it's 1,200,000 acres of wildlife forest in the Boundary Waters Canoe Wildlife Area. And in that place, there is so much land to traverse. There's so many different conditions and wildlife. And I remember going on my first trip and I was like, why do we have all of this stuff? Like, it seems like a little overkill. And we were not going there to glamp, okay? Taking everything with us so we'd have all the luxuries of home. It's a little rustic. But I didn't understand the need for the supplies because I had never been on that journey. And no matter how many times we've been to that meeting, we've been to that interaction, we've had that discussion, we've had these certain feelings come up, there's always new ground, new territory because people are environments. It's not just the walls, it's not just the weather or the trees or the rocks or the land. People are environments. And so you need to continually grow your skills so that you are able to traverse those different environments. And that is how you navigate. And so as we're navigating, I want to use an analogy for you, and I hope it makes sense. Now, most of us are used to GPS, right? And once you become really good at navigation, you can rely on a compass. But for those of us, remember back in the day when there was a map, that big old map that you would fold out and you would start to read, you don't want to learn how to read a map when you need to use it. You want to be able to use it before you ever need it. And that's what we're here to do. And so when you think about navigating, the terrain is not the same as the map, and the map is not the terrain. The map cannot tell you, and by map, I mean previous experiences with people, situations, communication, soft skills. The map cannot tell you where all of the dangers lie in your professional lives. It cannot tell you where all of the operational confusion, where the interdepartmental conflict, where the distrust, it can't tell you where those things are on a consistent basis. That's why we have to grow and elevate our skills for handling those types of situations. We must move forward, but we want to do so in a safe and protected way as possible, not just for us, but for the people that we serve. And definitely from a personal perspective, As you're navigating through life and you're encountering these different situations, I mean, family conflicts, misunderstandings, distrust, emotional distancing, like all of those things happen because there's a breakdown in the C word. What's the C word? Communication. And it's not always external, talking to other people. Sometimes there's a breakdown in how we communicate within ourselves. By the way, talking to yourself, like that internal dialogue, that should be some of the best conversations you ever have. We have a lot of barriers. And just as time and technology evolve, so has our need to adjust. These are just some statistics, and they should resonate with you because you've lived it. These are things that happened on a national level, okay? This isn't isolated. The only one that is isolated is the last one, if you don't have kids or if you're not a student. So, on top of the barriers that we have connecting to one another, despite how we've advanced technology, how we've begun taking advantage of it, sometimes out of necessity, non traditional learning, anyone, we don't do a good job of advancing this hardware and this software. And so that is because talking about emotions, higher level soft skills, and sometimes even communication, it can be weird, it can be awkward, it can be hard. It sounds cliche in some cases, touchy feely. But the truth is, it is a person who is tough to be able to talk about tough topics. That's what it takes. And that's what you are. That's why you're here. And that's why I really appreciate your attendance. And you have to be real to recognize real opportunities to communicate. The fear of digging up old wounds or having your world views put on a chopping block or having to assess yourself, like, what if you reflect on yourself and you see something that needs to change, but you don't know how? Tricky, right? Well, remember why you are here. Remember that purpose, and that purpose will give you courage. Because in the next few moments, we're going to talk about some real deep things, but I'll do my best to keep it light. So, in the chat right now, I have a question for you. What are these three things? Somebody put the answer in the chat if you know. I'm excited to see if anyone does. What are those three things? Intergenerational, genealogical, collective, developmental, acute, preconscious, precognitive? Anyone know what those are? I'll give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Those are traumas. There was a very famous um, um, psychologist who specialized in trauma and understanding how trauma affects the human conditions. His name is Thomas Hübl, and he said that trauma becomes societal structures. It's very true. Let me prove it to you. Intergenerational trauma is a trauma through which you have experienced something through your ancestors. It could be your mother and father, your grandmother, your great grandmother or father. And so that trauma is handed down to you. So you didn't directly experience it, but it happened. There was an experience, there was an experiment with rats, okay? Rodents have a tough gig when it comes to science, but there's a good lesson here. In this experiment, what they did was they took the rats, they put them in a cage surrounded by electrodes, and they would spray the scent of cherry blossom simultaneously with the rats being shocked. And what did they do? Well, they ran into the corner. And so they repeated this over and over to the point where they stopped shocking them, but they would spray the scent of cherry blossoms, and the rats would still run to the corner without being shocked. So that consciousness, that programming had been solidified. And so the next generation of rats had never been shocked. They put them into the cage and they sprayed cherry blossom scents. And guess what? They reacted the exact same way, even though they never received the stimulus. So we can, we will inherit things from our previous generation. And that's important depending upon your family history and that lived experience from the previous generation. But also, we have collective. Collective is far more easier to understand because when I ask you what these numbers are, if some of you work in school statistics and you have been focused on school shootings, well, then you know those 10 years on the screen show the increase of school shootings, trauma, the way in which we react to news at school, the way in which administration reacts to a threat or a kid saying that they're going to do this or do that is much different than it was when I was going to school. Another good example of how we become impacted by collective trauma as a society is COVID. How many of us react differently when someone coughs in public or at a restaurant than before COVID? I know before COVID, I was like, okay, I hope they cover their mouth. Now it's like, okay, mask, anybody? Mask. So we have been programmed by this trauma. And COVID didn't affect everyone the same way. The same way certain stimulus that can cause trauma doesn't affect everyone the same way. During COVID, as a remote employee, the majority of the time, my life was impacted very differently than my wife's. My wife is a CNA. She works taking care of the elderly. She was in a place where COVID was extremely felt. There were people that were not able to visit their loved ones. They had to look through the glass and wave in many cases, not over days, not over weeks, over months of time. This is important because it has been proven scientifically through researching blue zones or places that are highly populated with centennials, people over the age of 100. And they found that it wasn't the water that was making them live longer. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the air. It wasn't if they smoked or not. It wasn't what they ate. It was close interpersonal relationships and social interaction. So yeah, COVID has had a profound effect on our society. And at this point, as we're talking about navigating, you might be like, why all of this talk about trauma? There are two main reasons. One, you can reflect internally to make sure that you aren't being affected or affecting someone else based upon the trauma that you may have, so that you can focus on what's happening instead of what happened, because trauma is what happened and how it affected you. Secondly, it will help you assess the difference between fault, concern, and responsibility. A good example of this is if you have developmental trauma from a time when, say, you were a child and you were made to feel less than and had affection or protection removed when you disappointed a parent. Instinctively, we as children, we know our survival is predicated by our connection to our parents. Like that's instinctual. You're not taught that, you just know. And as such, we adapt behaviors such as approval addiction and performing for love instead of performing for ourselves. So in that environment, you develop or you adapt coping mechanisms. As we develop that approval addiction, as an adult, you have an assignment or you have a report that's due. And it's late because someone didn't give you the information that you needed when they said they would. You start building stress automatically. Oh my gosh, I'm going to let them down. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Without asking the question, did I provide enough lead time for the information request? Was I clear about my deadline? Did I ask the right person? If the answer is yes, then the stress should only be when you fail to address the issue. Fool me once, right? So you can learn from that. Recognizing trauma in others is important as well. Even if you have honed your communication skills, you use tactful and considerate approaches, a trauma within someone could rear its ugly head. And if you're not careful, you could take responsibility for someone else's trauma. You don't want to do that. Trauma is not a condition, but it is something that can cause conditions. Trauma is not a dysfunction, but how we respond can cause dysfunction. Trauma is an adaptation. It is a response to a situation or a moment that you weren't resourced to handle, and you have held on to that reaction or that adaptation beyond when it serves you. Oddly enough, as leaders and as parents, we sometimes deny resources to those we serve because we've taken for granted the resources we possess. In other words, it's not a problem for us, so why should it be a problem for someone else? As a child, I remember hearing, "Stop crying. That ain't nothing to cry about." Growing up, my father, God love him, he had a catchphrase that he would use to groom me and my brother. I'll give you the radio edit version: fudge your feelings. When I grew up, I had to learn how to decipher what he meant. I had to learn that for myself. He didn't tell me. And I apologize to everyone who was with me along my journey. What he meant to say was, don't let your feelings be the only decision maker. What he meant to say was, don't be controlled by your feelings, but informed by them and use your heart and your head to make good choices. No matter what trauma or whose trauma, if you want that desired outcome, whatever it is, whatever the circumstance, you must overcome for the outcome. Internally, we recognize trauma, and when we can recognize that, you can help your own internal drama from rearing its ugly head or becoming an impact on someone else. You can avoid letting external traumas that are out of your control impact you. Whether your own or someone else's trauma can corrupt the use of the most powerful source of energy on this planet. So let's talk about it. There are 6 basic emotions that I'm going to talk about. Now, in life, if you feel, you probably know there's way more than 6, but I'm going to focus on these 6, mainly because Paul Ekman, who is one of the top 100 noted psychological minds of the 20th century, and he's also the guy whose work was behind the show Lie to Me. Yeah, Lie to Me. I think it was Paul Roth was like the main character. This guy could decipher if someone was lying or not just by looking at them and just by kind of, looking at all their micro expressions and things of that nature. So Paul Ekman, probably a good guy to listen to. And so he came up years ago with this research that said there were 6 basic root emotions. And so in focusing on those, I want to just have a discussion because this is kind of the beginning to understanding some of the deeper things that are behind how we as human beings interact, process information, relate to one another, relate to our external world. Anger, sad, happy, disgust, fear, surprise. These are all pretty common. But when we start to think about it, we put them into categories. Human beings are binary. We do not want to make a decision if we don't have to. I know this because there have been many times when I've come home and my wife has said, "What do you want to eat for dinner?" And you don't want to make a decision. It's an easy question, but that mindset of wanting to be binary, in other words, make quick, easy decisions, up, down, left, right, good or bad, that's okay in some situations, but when it comes to emotions, it's not healthy. And most of us would assign emotions this way. But I want to encourage you, I want to give you some insight to think a little deeper. Emotion is not good or bad. Emotion is simply energy, and it's energy in motion, energy coming out of you. That's actually what the Latin root stands for, amore. So if we begin to think about it that way, it is how we use our emotional energy that can be good or bad, that can lead to a positive or negative event in our lives. Research was conducted by the Kellogg School of Management along with HiQ Labs. And what they discovered after studying 58,000 plus workers, and they were from 11 different firms, they discovered that sitting near high performers boost your own performance by 15%. And they related it to a dollar amount because, right, that's what's important. It equated to over $1 million more in profit. So from a business perspective, we want to create proximity. The only way you can create an environment where you have a positive proximity is by understanding emotion on a deeper level and then also cultivating a community that understands and respects it. There has been a battle to make mental health a thing to where it is not weird, it's not stigmatized, especially in certain communities. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, in the African American community, mental health has been a stigma for a very long time. We just don't talk about it, but it's getting better. There are a lot of organizations out there doing work. So I do want to, I want to acknowledge that, but we still have a lot of work to do. If what I said was true about emotions being energy, there is energy that can lift you up, there is energy that can take you down. These energies and how we use them determines that. But I want to look at the positive and negative effects. And here's where you can begin to approach an understanding of opposing emotions, because I'll show you how to use it to your benefit. When we have opposing emotions, we have things that counteract, or we have feelings that counteract other feelings, and we can use that to our benefit. But first, we need to understand the duality. We need to understand that emotions aren't good or bad, but they have positive or negative effects. That is crucial to understand. There have been times in my life where I should have been more angry. It would have helped the situation, but I wasn't. And then there have been times when I was a little too angry, and that didn't help. There's also times when there has been sadness, or there has been some sort of negative effect that came from the emotion of sadness. Happy as well. You can be overconfident. And there have been times in my life where I wish I would have had a better skill at setting boundaries, let things go on too long. As a business owner, if you have people that work for you and you don't have an appropriate level of disgust or not accepting certain behaviors because you have a lot of empathy, that can create problems that don't just affect the people, but it affects your entire business. So there are benefits, there are pluses and minuses to every emotion that we have. And if we understand that, then it's not the emotion, it's what's happening because of it. It's how it's affecting us. Understanding the communication system that I call Compass will allow you to kind of put into a framework things that are actionable, that make sense. It's an easy lift, but it needs to be put in a framework. So I'm probably not going to tell you much that you don't know here, but I'm going to break it down in a way that's digestible, that's relatable, and that you can begin to think about and utilize. And so when we look at the communication compass, we have the communicator, we have the opportunity and information. Own the opportunity, inspect the information. All information is not good information. I've seen people act on bad information and it doesn't turn out good. Manners and methods of sending information. Methods missing manners make messy messages. And then there's place and time. Place and time matters because the place that you're at mentally, where the other person, they matter, the other person, where they are at, and then also the time. That can impact your information. It can corrupt it. A good information delivered poorly doesn't yield the effect that you're after. You must pay attention to yourself during the conversation and to the other person. And this is true no matter what space you are in. So when you think about space, because sometimes it can be confused with place, the space is the physical location. Have you ever heard you praise in public and you correct in private? I know a lot of supervisors who haven't heard that. We'll leave that there. And then situational assessment. You must be able to assess the situation. And doing all of these things makes you a really good communicator. Now, I can tell you with a degree of ambiguity, the reason I know many of these things, and they're not theory, but they're lived experiences, they are wisdom, is because I have been coaching for about 8 years. And as someone who has coached, especially within businesses and corporations, to where I have a contractual agreement of confidentiality, I have borne witness to people who have said things about their boss, about their employer, about their direct reports that I could not share. I could not tell the other person. And so I've harbored all this. So this is actually kind of therapy for me to talk about some of these things because I've witnessed what it looks like when there has not been psychological safety established and there is not a relationship through which feedback can become a loop that is healthy and reciprocal. And the reason it's so important for you as a leader at home or whether you're at the office, the reason it's so important is we need to help people fill the gaps of discomfort because all discomfort isn't caused by you. In fact, a lot of it came from their previous job, some of their life experiences, or potentially some of their trauma. So now that we've talked about emotion, about some of the ways that you can think about and navigate trauma, and we looked at some of the different factors of emotion, we're going to talk about the emotional compass. This is a compass that is evolved. An actual compass, it does one thing. It only does one thing. It points north. It's based on the magnetic poles, right? It doesn't do anything but point north. So it gives you a direction and it doesn't change. However, in human beings, between all of the different emotions and experiences and how we feel that is conditional, we have the ability to change our compass at any given moment. Here's an example for you. I am out by myself and I have someone who's had a few too many and they are belligerent and they are yelling expletives at me. They're being nasty, negative, but they don't touch me. I'm good. It literally does not bother me. I'm out in public. There's someone who's belligerent, who's had a little too much to drink, and my kids are with me. Total different story. We change our emotional compass, and that's why certain things will happen, and you'll hear about them happening to someone, and you find out that that person did that one thing that you just can't fathom them doing. You had never seen them in the right situation to do those things. That's why they say, don't let the smooth taste fool you. Our emotions are a energy source that's wrapped around a magnet, so it creates an electromagnet. It is very strong. Depending upon our level of control over our emotions, it can be extremely strong to where it causes negative outcomes and steers you towards your conflict creation or creating conflict versus your conflict resolution. And for this illustration, our conflict resolution, the place we want to go with good outcomes, that is our true north. And so as these waves are coming out, it's not actual waves. What it is your attitudes and attributes. Those attitudes and attributes are palpable. That's why some people will talk and they'll say, man, they're eating out of your hand because they're eating up your words because there's a magnetism. Somebody, they just have a magnetic personality. Yes, yes, because the attitude and the attributes that you're seeing from them, they resonate with you. They seem appropriate. And it doesn't mean that there are good or bad. It just means in that situation, they fit that situation, and how you relate to them is pleasing to you. It makes sense. It's logical. You agree with what they're doing. However, there are cases when we have things that pull us down south. We have attitudes and attributes that usually we don't intentionally show. And sometimes we're unconscious of them, but they are pulling us in undesired directions. They're pulling us toward undesired outcomes. And when we want to take more control of that, to become more self aware, not always relying on people to tell us, because certain emotions, certain ways of being are like bad breath, ugly babies, and bad clothing choices. Now, let me reverse engineer that. By bad clothing choices, I don't mean it's against the dress code. I just mean the colors don't match. It's too loud. I am slightly colorblind, so I understand this. I understand this to a deep degree. And obviously, no one will ever tell someone their baby is ugly. And when it comes to breath, it is very socially awkward to tell someone that their breath is stinking. It's just awkward. And so what do? If we're really close, if you have a comfort level, you might tell them, you might give them a piece of gum, but typically you're not going to know. And so you'll be repulsing people. Well, emotions can be the same way. So let's break this down from a opposing emotional standpoint. At the top left, you see calmness and empathy, and then at the bottom, you see anger and hostility. So let's break down what this looks like. If you are exuding the magnetic waves of calmness, then you are sending out understanding, positive confrontation, which means you're disarming, and then emotional regulation. You're calm. I mean, you might not be happy, but you're not losing your cool. And also, you might be showing goodwill, harmony, cooperation, connection. So that's good stuff. It's going to pull you north. However, hostility will pull you south, right? It can make you defensive. It can make you someone who is attacking or avoiding. By the way, avoidance is a way of attacking. Ask kids in high school who have been shunned by their peers or blocked off of accounts. I didn't do anything. Yeah, avoidance is attacking. And then also resolution denial. I'm not asking anyone to self identify, but just think inside your head to yourself. Have you ever become so upset that a solution was presented to you, and by that point you didn't care? It's a human thing, and it's not specific to any particular situation. It is just a human thing. It's something that we do. It's the power of our emotions. And then there's anger, and it can make you very aggressive. It can make you attacking or avoiding. It can also create negative confrontation. Those are examples when calmness and empathy are moving you towards what you want, your positive relationships, your healthy communication, and then hostility and anger are moving you away. It's moving you toward negative outcomes, right? We don't want those. And the thing is, if you have the right attributes, the right attitude, and the desired outcomes are more likely. They're not guaranteed because you cannot control other people. But with these negative ones, I can almost guarantee you that those negative relationships, those negative outcomes, unhealthy communication, it's almost a guarantee. And most of us would stick to that and we go, okay, I get it, anger, hostility, calmness, empathy, but what if we switch those? And if you're taking notes, now's a good time. What if we switch those? So now anger and hostility is going to take us north toward conflict resolution. And then calmness and empathy is going to pull us away from our resolution. It's going to create conflict. Anger and hostility, how could that yield a positive result? Well, there are situations where you must be assertive. So you're controlling your anger, you're using the power correctly. Also, setting boundaries and being authentic. If you get mad about a topic in a place with people, and then that same topic, different place, some of the same people, not all of them, and you don't get angry, that creates a lack of authenticity. An example of that would be I had a friend who happened to be white. He had been telling some jokes when I wasn't around that were not very sensitive. Okay. I think you get where I'm going with this. I find myself in a circle of people. I knew everyone. And then one of the gentlemen said to my friend, used to be friend, hey man, tell Marshall that one joke about the, and he gave me a weird look. And I was like, what joke? And so he slowly began to tell it. And he said, I mean, don't take this the wrong way. When people start out telling a joke and they say, don't take it the wrong way, you probably just shouldn't, just don't tell the joke. But he was not consistent because around me, he had acted like, racism and, those types of jokes made him angry. And then hostility. Hostility can create trust. I am very protective of my wife, but I had a child before we got together. We've been married for 20 years. Here's the thing. I had very negative, Jerry Springer, some would say, situations with my ex. And it was so much so, and she had mental health problems, come to find out. It was so much so that I became numb to that. It didn't bother me. I was like, that's just her, whatever. because I had to survive. I adapted to my trauma. When I got with my wife, the trauma was not affecting me, but the drama still existed. And so when my ex was doing, saying, acting certain ways, my reaction wasn't hostile at all. I was like, she's, whatever. Just that made my wife feel unprotected. It made her feel like I would not stand up for her. If I had been more hostile, I would have saved several years of drama in my marriage. Okay. I'm just letting you know there are situations when a little hostility, I'm not saying I should have throat punched her. That is not what I'm saying. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But there are situations when certain emotions that we typically think of as bad can be good and appropriate when used the right way. So, how could empathy be bad? Well, empathy, and many people call themselves empaths, and they're like, I'm an empath. I feel deeply, I'm connected. All right. Well, here's the thing, if you have empathy to the point where it dysregulates you, it's not good. And what that means is you go into the office place, you're having a great day, you're having a team meeting, and then you hear some negative news. Maybe there was a passing, maybe there was something that happened that was negative, and you feel for that other person, you feel for that other situation, and you let it impact you to where it changes your mood. You can't go on, you cry, you keep talking about it. Empathy can dysregulate you. It can also create attachment to things that don't belong to you. And so you shouldn't be carrying the weight or the burden. Remember, fault, concern, responsibility. And it can make you unpredictable. I don't know what version of Marshall we're going to get today. Hope everything's going good. Once again, things that people won't say to you, but they'll say behind your back. And then calmness, it can make you seem apathetic. And that was what happened to me, right? I was calm in situations where my wife was freaking out, and it made it seem like I didn't care. Also, similar to my friend who was not consistent with his emotion, is if you have inconsistencies, you're calm in one situation with one person. My kids have brought this to my attention before. But if I'm calm when child A, I'm not going to say their name, they might watch this. When I am calm when child A does something and then child B does the exact same thing and I'm not calm, right? So that inconsistency is not good for leadership. A consistent leader is a trusted leader. If you understand that, you can get more positive results than negative ones. It is crucial. It's inevitable that situations are going to come up where this could impact your relationships with the people that you lead. And so these opposing emotions that we have, if you don't get anything, please get this. They are power to be utilized, period, point blank. They are not enemies. You should not condemn yourself or anyone else. If someone feels something, it is instantaneously valid. The reasons they're feeling that way may not be valid. They may not even be based in the now. It could be based on how they're reacting to a memory of something else, but they are valid. But we can use them to balance any situation. And so when we're talking and we're communicating, if we can utilize our emotions correctly, we can use our empathy and we can use our calmness so that we are open to the opportunity and so that we are calmly getting the information and we can pay attention. Because if you're in your feelings, as people say, you cannot be in the moment. However, if we become hostile and angry, the manner and method in which we communicate, you let your emotions drive what you say. Not only what you say, but you let it drive when you say it, how you say it. And you don't care about the space. You don't care who's around. You don't care about the situation. Oh boy, I know we've all been around people, and some of us might have been that person. I'm not judging you, but I'm just suggesting maybe you reconsider, take some time, deal with some things that maybe you haven't talked about that you need to talk about, find other ways. And on the flip side, putting anger and hostility at the top, as a communicator, using it correctly, it can impact your manner of speaking because you understand you are angry, you're aware of it. And so you take a moment. Don't send that email yet. Don't make that phone call. Don't make that quick response. I have friends that are still in jail today because they didn't control the emotion of anger based on words, no physical contact, and placing time. It can make you understand that I am feeling very hostile right now. This is not the place, and this is not the time. Take a beat. In relationships, it's very important to know when you need to take a beat and step back. But you have to have control and you have to understand the space that you're in. Too much calmness, too much empathy, it can make you receive any information through a lens that is rose colored. It can make you avoid opportunities. You're so calm, not a big deal. No need to talk about it. There is a friend of mine, Scott Harvey. He wrote this book, Silence Kills. I highly recommend it. Hostage negotiator. He's been featured in so many different places. I got to go see him speak in Frankfort, Kentucky, to the government employees. Silence can kill. Silence is not a good thing. And being too calm or too empathetic can lead to accepting conditions that you shouldn't. Also, it can lead you to not pay attention. Oh, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, you shouldn't always be calm. Everything is not fine. And it's okay to not be okay. And then your situational assessment. Once again, those rose colored glasses. And so it can mess up your goals in having a positive outcome. So just be aware of that. Give it some thought. Mull it over. Think about it. And so here we have our opposing emotions. And so with our opposing emotions, we want to find that middle ground when we need to be neutral. And we don't need to go left or right. We don't need to necessarily expose any of those particular situations to our emotions. The emotions may not serve you in that circumstance. And there is a book by Patrick Lencioni. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It is an incredible book. I highly recommend it. And I'm going to recommend 2 more books for you, just in case you were wondering. But in The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it goes through a pyramid and it talks about different aspects that cause dysfunction. And this is a bestseller, so I would trust the information. I loved reading it. When your emotions are out of order, it can cause ambiguity. It can cause artificial harmony because you're someone who wants to avoid conflict, not because you don't think you need to talk, but because you're afraid you won't be able to control your emotions when you do. I'm not convicting. Am I? If I am, feel it. I told you might feel some things. Also, status and ego, but the 5 dysfunctions of a team, incredible book. The next is, as we think about neutralizing these, just understand there are more emotions than what you're feeling in a given moment. And you can balance them out with things that may not be happy, but it's not depression. It can be contentment, accepting things that you cannot change. Notice how accept is in here twice. Acceptance can be very important because we cannot control every situation. So even as you are becoming more educated, becoming more knowledgeable, you will still find situations where you cannot control every aspect of it. But I want you to have balance. That's it. That's the goal. I want you to have balance. And there's this book called Creating Your Best Life. It's actually written by Bill Walton and Mark King. There's a page that talks about creating a blueprint for your best life. Energy equals matter. Thoughts and words equal energy. Thoughts and words matter. How simple is that, right? Frame it as I'm trying to frame it in as simple a way as possible. Whatever notes you take, however you're digesting this, use it in a way that can benefit you so you can move forward, because the balance is so important. We have talked about a whole lot, but I'm not going to be that person who does not talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm running out of time, because I've got 5 minutes, and you'd be surprised what can happen in 5 minutes. There is this book. It's called Professionally Lynched. And the reason I want to talk to you about it is because there are people who have lived experiences that are so far removed from your own that it's hard to relate to them. So when they are experiencing trauma or going through something that is negative, if you are a leader and they come to you for help, if you're so far removed from their reality, it will be hard for you to acknowledge or resonate because sometimes we have logic that must fit a situation into itself before we take action. And one of the worst things is when it involves culture, ethnicity, or any other type of diversity issue, including race. But Professionally Lynched, it was written by Tanya White, revealing system wide workplace injustices and healing from a lifelong trauma that it caused everyone. There is a page in here where it talks about traits of workplace change agents. And so I'm just going to read you a small bit as we're winding down. The traits of a workplace change agent creates an authentic, trusting, welcoming environment of transparency. People deal with them because they choose to, not have to. And then responses from professional lynchers, strong language, huh? Creates a distrustful, divisive, and doubtful environment. Through their lies and negative innuendos, people deal with them out of obligation. We don't ever want to be that person, whether it is regarding race or any topic, okay? Just understand that you might need to expand your knowledge or information beyond where it already is and beyond this webinar, even though it's awesome. But we talked about a lot. We talked about reducing communication drama by acknowledging trauma. We talked about removing emotional condemnation, unlocking our potential through key aspects of communication, navigating our emotional compass, and tapping into the power of opposing emotion. So there's just one thing left to do. I want you to sell forward. I want you to take action. You're going to see opportunities to use what you've learned. You're going to acknowledge the actions that you need to take, and you're going to implement at least one thing from today. And you're going to learn from others, situations, and learn from yourself. So give some thought. What is that one thing? That one thing that you're going to take away today? What is it? Marinate on it. Remember, you were here for a purpose. Everyone who's here with me now, and thank you for being here, and everyone who is watching this recording, you're here for a purpose. Do not leave without that one thing, at least, that you'll do to help yourself move forward, to make a difference for those that you serve. And so as we come to a close, and we look at this beautiful landscape, see that picnic table at the top? That's a long way up there. That means someone put it there. And that's where you want to be. And that represents the goals, your dreams, ambitions, whatever you're trying to do as a leader. Is the struggle real? What if you could surround yourself with success? What if you could increase your likelihood of succeeding? I think being around people that are trying to do what you're doing would help you succeed. And so imagine being part of a community where everyone wants you to succeed. There is a place and there is a space. You can have a safe place where you can grow without the fear of condemnation. Would that be helpful? If it would be, if this fits you right on the journey, I want you to imagine developing your inner mindset and your outer presentation skills. So we develop inwardly and then it shows on the outside. And would you like a protected way that you can cultivate and empower your ability to grow, change, communicate? Well, there are two paths, and I'm going to offer them for you here. And I'm not actually going to give you any more information other than letting you know that I am starting a personal communication mastermind group. I'll be starting it next week. And I'm also starting a professional communication mastermind group. And you can read more about the benefits, but I just want you to know that there is a place. And with each group, regardless of which one you decide, you can have 12 weekly group sessions, access to customized discussions similar to this one, also top tier guest speakers, recorded learning sessions, and there'll be some bonus material. But whatever you decide, I want you to move forward. So if you do want to take advantage of that, if it will be a benefit, You can scan the code, you can do it now, or you can just wait because you're going to get an email with more information about it, whatever you decide to do. I would love to stay in contact with you. So you can scan this. It will give you my contact information. Feel free to call or email. I'd love to chat and see any other way that I can support you. But sell forward. See those opportunities. Take advantage and take action. Acknowledge what needs to be done. Implement at least one thing from today. Implement two if you're feeling frisky. And then learn from others. Learn from situations and learn from yourself. I wish you all an incredible journey toward becoming that leader who is mindful and able to navigate themselves toward professional excellence and personal harmony.